We were struggling and my husband asked his parents if we may stay at their place for 1 month. They denied as their golden child has taken up the additional room for his games. Months later they want us to give a roof over their heads. I, Mia, 28F, can still remember the weight of that night, like the world was sitting on my chest. The apartment, though small, had always felt like home. Tom and I had built it from the ground up, piece by piece. But somewhere along the way, things started to break. Bills started piling up higher than we could handle, and even the walls that used to feel comforting now felt like they were closing in on us. I never imagined that my life would come to this. I had always thought that hard work and determination would carry me through, that love would be enough to protect us from anything that might come our way. But here we were, barely scraping by. It was the kind of situation that left you with few options. And that's when Tom made the call to his parents. He had been pacing the kitchen for hours, the phone in his hand, nervously tapping it against his leg. "I don't know how they'll take it," he had said earlier, his voice quieter than usual. I could see the storm of emotions in his eyes, frustration, embarrassment, and a quiet kind of defeat. "Just ask," I told him, trying to mask my own anxiety. "It's just for a month, Tom. We just need a little time to get on our feet." So, Tom dialed the number. I could hear the hesitancy in his voice when he said, "Mom, Dad. Can we stay with you for a month? Just until we can get things figured out. Things are tight here, and we don't want to keep putting it off." I held my breath as he listened to the response. His shoulders tensed. The silence between them stretched out like a rope, tight and unyielding. "We're sorry, Tom," his father's voice came through, cold and final. "Jake's taken up the extra room for his games. You know how important that space is to him." I felt a pang in my chest. I wanted to scream, to demand to know how it was that we were standing on the edge of losing everything, and yet Jake, Tom's younger brother, the golden child, was given everything without hesitation. A room for his games, a life of comfort, free of struggle. Tom didn't say anything for a long while. "Okay. Thanks," he finally muttered, before hanging up. I didn't know what to say. My heart broke for him. "For us, maybe it's not the right time," I said softly, trying to sound optimistic. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. It wasn't about timing. It was about something else, something deeper that had always been there. A gulf between us and them that no amount of polite conversation could bridge. Tom dropped his head into his hands. "I don't know what to do anymore, Mia. I thought maybe they'd help. I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't know how to fix him. Or us." The evening Tom made the call to his parents, the air in our small apartment felt heavier than usual. The walls, painted in a faded shade of beige, seemed to close in around us, echoing the silent desperation that we didn't dare voice out loud. We'd been drowning, buried under bills, late notices, and the weight of trying to keep it all together. The job at the diner barely covered rent, and Tom's part-time gig at the hardware store was nothing more than a flicker of hope that never quite lit the way. As Tom paced the living room, phone in hand, I sat on the worn-out couch, staring at the chipped coffee table that had seen better days. "I'm going to call them," Tom said, his voice low, like the words themselves were heavy with shame. I nodded, not because I was okay with it, but because we had no choice. Tom's fingers tightened around the phone as he dialed. The ringtone echoed through the room, each beep a reminder of how far we'd fallen. When his mother picked up, Tom's voice was steady, but I could hear the nervous tremor beneath it. "Hi, Mom. Yeah, we're doing okay. Listen, I wanted to ask if we could stay with you for a month. Just until we get back on our feet." There was a pause. I could almost hear the distant murmur of his mother's voice, but her words were muffled. Tom's face grew tense, his jaw clenched as he listened, then he spoke, his voice tight. "I understand. Yeah, no problem." He hung up without saying another word. I didn't need to ask what happened. His expression said it all. "They said no," Tom whispered, his eyes distant, like he was trying to erase the memory of the rejection. I swallowed hard, feeling the sting of it all over again. The days after the call were a blur of forced smiles and silent frustrations. The rejection wasn't just in the words, they echoed in the way Tom's parents had dismissed us. As if we were an inconvenience they couldn't afford to bear, but what hurt the most was the reason they gave. Tom's mother had said it in that polite, rehearsed tone, like it was just another excuse to avoid facing the reality of their own selfishness. Jake's room is being used for his games. We just don't have the space, Jake. The golden child. The one who could do no wrong. The same Jake who never had to struggle, who always had everything handed to him on a silver platter. I sat in our tiny kitchen, staring at the chipped mug in front of me, the one that said best mom ever, a cruel joke. Considering I didn't feel like the best anything anymore, Tom came over, sitting beside me. His hand brushing against mine. I'm sorry, Mia, he said quietly. I shook my head, forcing a smile. It's not your fault. But it was. Not in the way Tom thought, it was their fault. The next day, we visited Tom's parents to return some borrowed tools, hoping to face them with the same casual indifference they'd shown us. His mother opened the door with that fake smile, and his father stood behind her, arms crossed like he was trying to appear unaffected. Tom cleared his throat. We just wanted to drop these off. His mother's eyes darted to the tools, then back to Tom. Thanks. How are you guys holding up? Tom shrugged. Oh, just great. Thanks for asking. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I stepped forward, my voice sharp as glass. I said, my tone dripping with sarcasm, it's really impressive how you managed to prioritize Jake's gaming room over your own son and his wife. It must be nice to have a family that's always there for you. His father's face flushed, but he didn't respond. Tom's mother's smile wavered, the mask slipping just slightly. I leaned in closer. But hey, if you ever need a place to stay, let us know. I'm sure we'll have plenty of room, once we clear out the space Jake's been hogging for his important games. Tom grabbed my hand gently, pulling me back. We're fine, he said, his voice low but firm. We've got everything under control. As we walked away, I felt a strange mix of anger and relief. We hadn't begged. We hadn't pleaded, we'd faced them, and for the first time in a long while, we'd been seen. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, things weren't as simple as I'd hoped. Tom's parents moved in, and the house, once our sanctuary, now felt crowded. Too crowded. At first, they were polite. They tried to help with cooking, with little things around the house, but I could sense the strain in their efforts. It was as though they were trying too hard to avoid the discomfort of their own situation. Trying to maintain some sense of control in a place where they had none, I tried to be understanding. After all, I knew how difficult it must be for them to be in this position. To ask for help when they had spent so many years refusing to offer it. But it was hard. It was so hard to pretend like I didn't remember all the times they had shut us out in the past. Jake, of course, didn't visit. Why would he? He had his own life, his own space. The golden child was never expected to be there when things got tough. It was always Tom. Always Tom who had to bear the weight of their mistakes, and now, here I was, trying to hold it all together. Trying to be the person who kept the peace. Trying to find a way to move forward when the past was never truly behind us. The days slipped into weeks, and the house grew heavier with unspoken words. Tom's parents had settled in, but the weight of their presence wasn't just in the cluttered living room or the extra dishes piling up in the sink. It was in the way they looked at Jake's empty room, as if it were a shrine to everything they'd lost. One evening, I found myself in the kitchen, trying to quiet the storm in my mind by chopping vegetables. Tom was at the table, scrolling through his phone, his face etched with exhaustion. His mother walked in, her expression casual but her tone sharp. Mia, do you think Jake could come over for dinner this weekend? It's been ages since we've seen him, and he's always so busy with his games. I paused, knife hovering mid-air. My heart raced, not from the effort of chopping but from the familiar ache in my chest. Tom cleared his throat. Mom, I think we've talked about this. We're already a bit cramped here, and Jake, his mother cut him off, her smile forced. Oh, I just thought it'd be nice. You know, to have the whole family together. Besides, Jake's been having a rough time with work lately. He could use some support. I felt my blood simmering beneath the surface. Support? The same support we never got? The same Jake who had a room reserved for his games while we were left scrambling for a roof over our heads. I swallowed the bitterness, nodded politely, and said, "Of course, that sounds great." But inside, I was screaming. That night, as Tom and I sat on the couch, I finally let it out. "Do you see what's happening, Tom? They're trying to make Jake a part of our life again, like he's the glue that holds everything together. But he's not. He's the reason we were left out in the cold in the first place." Tom sighed, rubbing his temples. "I know. I don't want to cause more tension." But the tension was already there. It was in the way his parents acted like we were doing them a favor by letting them stay. It was in the way they treated Jake like royalty, even in his absence, and I was tired. The day had started with a forced sense of normalcy, a fragile attempt to pretend that things were fine. Tom's parents had invited Jake over for dinner, insisting it was family time, despite the fact that family time had felt like a foreign concept to us for years. I spent the morning cleaning the house, scrubbing down the kitchen counters until they shone, fluffing pillows, and setting the table with the kind of care that felt like it belonged to someone else's home. I even baked a lasagna, Tom's favorite, hoping that maybe, just maybe, it would feel like a dinner worth having. But as the clock ticked closer to 6 p.m., I felt a knot tighten in my chest. I tried to push it aside, but it was like a shadow I couldn't shake. Then the doorbell rang. Tom opened the door, and there he was, Jake. He strolled in with that familiar, cocky swagger, as if this was his kingdom and we were merely the peasants who got to host him. He had his usual smug grin plastered on his face, his phone already out, scrolling mindlessly as if he couldn't be bothered to engage with the people in the room. Tom's parents greeted him enthusiastically, as if they hadn't seen him in years, offering him snacks and asking about his work. Meanwhile, I stood in the background, my hands gripping the edge of the kitchen counter. I could feel the heat rising in my chest, but I forced myself to smile. Jake eventually flopped onto the couch like it was his throne, casually tossing his bag onto the floor. He didn't even bother to acknowledge me. I took a deep breath and said, "Jake, I hope you're hungry. I made dinner." He glanced up briefly, barely looking at me. "Oh, cool. Thanks." That was it. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut, but then, Jake's next words came like a slap across my face. "You know, I don't get why you guys make such a big deal about everything. It's just a room. I mean, we're not exactly the ones who needed help when things got tough. Maybe if you had been a little more like me, you wouldn't have been in that situation in the first place." The words hit me hard. It wasn't just the insult, it was the casual, almost bored way he said it, like it was just another joke. I stood up so fast my chair scraped loudly against the floor, the sound cutting through the tense silence. "Excuse me?" I snapped, my voice trembling with anger. "You think you're better than us because you had a room for your games while we were fighting to keep a roof over our heads?" Jake shrugged, a smug grin creeping back onto his face. "Hey, I'm just saying. Maybe if you weren't so busy whining about it, you'd have figured things out." That was the moment I snapped. "Whining?" I echoed, my voice rising. "We begged for help, Jake. We begged your parents for 1 month of shelter, and they turned us away because your precious gaming room was too important. You know what? We didn't need their help. We built our own life, even when they turned their backs on us. But you? You think you're better because you had the luxury of never having to struggle." The room fell silent. Tom's parents stared at us, their faces frozen in shock. Jake didn't say anything for a moment, his grin fading as he realized I wasn't backing down. Then Tom stood up beside me, his face flushed with a mix of anger and something else. "Relief, yeah," he said, his voice steady. "Mia's right. We've been trying to keep the peace for too long, but not anymore." His mother finally spoke, her voice defensive but shaky. "We didn't mean to." I cut her off. You didn't mean to turn your backs on us when we needed you the most? You didn't mean to make Jake the priority while we were left to fend for ourselves? Tom's father looked down, his expression softening. Maybe we were wrong, he admitted quietly, maybe? I shot back, the bitterness thick in my throat. It's not maybe. It's yes. You were wrong. Jake finally spoke, his voice low and defensive. I didn't ask for this, you know. I didn't ask to be part of your mess. Tom's face darkened. You know what, Jake? This isn't about you. It's about the fact that we've been expected to put up with being treated like we don't matter. But we do. And we're not going to pretend anymore. Jake opened his mouth to respond, but Tom's mother held up her hand. Enough. The room was heavy with silence, the weight of years of unspoken resentment finally breaking free. The days following our confrontation with Tom's parents felt like walking through a storm that had finally cleared. The silence in the house wasn't filled with the usual tension of unspoken words or hidden resentment. No, this silence was different. It was heavier, yes, but it was also honest. Tom and I didn't talk much right after the incident. There was nothing to say that hadn't already been said. But as we sat in the living room, the weight of our words hanging in the air, I realized something: we had finally stood up for ourselves. The morning after the confrontation, I was in the kitchen, sipping coffee when Tom's mother walked in. She hesitated at the doorway, her face unreadable, then said quietly, "I'll help you with breakfast." I looked up, surprised. She had never offered to help like that before. "Sure," I replied, keeping my tone even, my heart pounding with the memory of her words from the night before. As we prepared the meal, there was no forced small talk, no fake pleasantries. Just the quiet clatter of dishes and the occasional glance exchanged. Filled with things we both weren't ready to say out loud, but the gesture mattered. It was the first time she acted like we were equals. Later that day, Tom's father came to me. He stood in the hallway, his hands stuffed into his pockets, looking uncomfortable. "Mia," he began, his voice hesitant, I wanted to say, "I'm sorry." I blinked, caught off guard. "For what?" I asked, even though I knew exactly what he meant. "For not being there when you needed us. For prioritizing Jake over you and Tom. We were wrong." His words were simple, but they hit me hard. It wasn't just the apology, it was the acknowledgement of the hurt we'd carried for so long. "I appreciate that," I said quietly, my voice thick with emotion. "But it's not just about the past. It's about how we move forward." Tom's father nodded, his eyes meeting mine with something close to regret. With time, the dynamics began to shift. Tom and I stopped walking on eggshells. We stopped pretending to be okay with things we weren't. We set boundaries. We made it clear that while we were happy to help Tom's parents, we would no longer be their emotional crutch. We were no longer the family that would bend over backward to accommodate their needs while ignoring our own. Jake didn't visit anymore, and honestly, I didn't miss him. He was a shadow from the past, a reminder of what we'd survived, but Tom's parents began to change. They helped with chores without being asked. They thanked us for letting them stay, genuinely this time, not out of obligation. One evening, Tom's mother sat down with me on the porch, her eyes softer than before. "You know," she said, "we always thought Jake was the one who'd do great things. But you and Tom, you've built something real. You've got something that matters." I was speechless. It wasn't about being praised. It was about being seen. The real turning point came when Tom's father, after weeks of quiet reflection, said, "We'd like to help you with the mortgage. We know things have been tough, and we want to contribute." I stared at him, unsure how to respond. "Tom and I can manage," I said softly, my pride mixed with gratitude, but he insisted. "We're not asking for anything in return. Just, we're sorry. And we want to support you, like we should have from the start." It wasn't just about the money. It was about the respect, the acknowledgement that we were more than just the people who'd been left behind. Eventually, Tom and I learned that standing up for ourselves wasn't about burning bridges, it was about building stronger ones. We realized that family isn't always about blood or shared history. It's about respect, support, and the willingness to see each other for who we truly are, and even though it took years of hurt and disappointment to get there, I knew we were stronger for it, because in the end, the roof we built wasn't just over our heads. It was over our hearts.